nobody ever talks about the importance of calcium, including land-grant universities. I mean, it's basically a battle every day, but slowly but surely I'm winning that battle, I think.
Yeah, my name is Jim Halbeisen, and this is my opinion.
Our guest today is Keith Shutt. Keith is located in Minto, North Dakota, which if you've got a good arm, you could probably throw the ball to Canada. So if you want to take a look at the map and find that area, Keith has a lime spreading business, and Keith works with us with the Grower's Mineral Solution product. And we're getting ready to start up spring planting, but usually these guys are kind of the tail enders for us. So we thought we'd hop up to North Dakota and see what's going on up there. So Keith, if you want to get started and kind of talk a little bit about your business and yourself and where you've come from originally before you got up there and kind of what your history is, then we'll get to talking a little bit about the growers program, particularly since you do a lot of lime spreading. We'd like to talk a little bit about calcium.
Sure. So my name's Keith Shutt. I live in Minto, North Dakota. So we're just 60 miles south of the Canadian border. I started this business in 2012. My dad had been on the growers program when we lived in Pennsylvania, and the same when we lived in Minnesota. So my dad started back in the late 60s, I think, with growers. So I've always known the importance of calcium. And when I figured out that the sugar beet factories had all this byproduct, which the EPA considers hazardous material until a farmer takes it, and then it's considered fertilizer. So that's kind of how I got started with it. I worked on a big farm operation, and took me several years to get them to try some lime. But once they did, it was very successful. So then I decided that I might as well venture out on my own and see if I could ever talk anybody into putting 10 ton to the acre of beet lime on. So it hasn't been easy. Of course, nobody ever talks about the importance of calcium, including land-grant universities. I mean, it's basically a battle every day, but slowly but surely I'm winning that battle, I think. But it is kind of maddening, though, when you look at all the information out there about soil health, and there are absolutely nobody in the ag industry talking about calcium other than basically the growers program. So that's kind of sad in a way.
So, hey, Keith, kind of explain to the listeners about why it's much more of a challenge up there. For example, pH is considered the basic measurement for whether you should apply limestone, and what kind of pH soils you have, and why that gives you a little bit more of a challenge than we see in some areas.
Right. So Red River Valley soil is classified as a calcareous soil. It's a Fargo clay. So our soil pH, pretty much every sample you look at is going to be over 8. There's a lot of them that are 8.1. Now, I do have some guys that, we've been spreading lime for 12, 13 years. They're getting down into the high 7s, but, they're still not at neutral. So, Land Grant University, NDSU, Fargo, North Dakota, tells everybody it's calcareous soil. Soil pH is high, absolutely don't need calcium, which, of course, we know that is to be a false statement. And, Ken Ferry, he talks about this all the time. Just because it shows up on a soil test does not mean it's available in the soil. And a lot of guys, I think, have a hard time understanding the reason for that is soil is not baby powder in its natural state. It's very coarse particles. So, and obviously, just like lime material, the finer you get it, the more available it is to any growing plant. So, and I explain that to guys. obviously in the state that it's farming in, the particles are big. So just because it shows up on a soil test does not mean it's something available out there to be used.
Yeah, Keith.
And
One,
obviously, when we do the strip test,
Yep.
it shows up right away.
The thing about the soil test, there's a couple of fallacies in there. Number one, the first thing they do to a soil test is dehydrate it, dry it down, and then to get it to react in the test tube, they grind it up. And see, you're absolutely correct. Those coarse particles in there are made fine, which starts to increase their availability. But the bigger issue is this biological complex. They cannot measure that. There are some laboratories that are attempting to measure that, and they're struggling at it. And see, that's really the thing that is the best indicator for the calcium. And see, they continue to use chemical tests. And see, I think the COVID-19 kind of gave us a very good indicator of that. When they started searching for the virus, they struggled mightily because you're using a chemical interpretation, to try to go after a live entity. And the same thing is true in the soil test. You're using those chemistries to try to depict what those biologicals are doing, and it's just not going to work very well. That's why the soil test the strip test, you're absolutely right. That's the name of the game. And really, that's how your business has thrived, in my opinion.
Right. So, it is interesting, though. I mean, there's getting to be, well, even in the establishment, there's getting to be more talk about calcium, and that's strictly, I think, part of that is because of the simple fact that, they're looking at all the health issues around the world, and obviously, like I explained to guys, basically what we grow doesn't have any nutritional value for the simple fact that the way it's grown today. I mean, it's not how Mother Nature intended it. Right. And and without the calcium present, like I explained to my customers, it's going to take more commercial fertilizer to get that job done because everything is so imbalanced in the soil. So, that's one of the biggest things that it's so hard to get some guys to understand because, of course, they get bombarded weekly by several people that drive in the driveway and, they want to sell them that magic elixir that's going to cure all the soil problems that they have. And you apply this, you're going to get 2 more bushel. You put this fungicide on, you're going to get 3 more bushel. And, I tell guys, all that money you spend on all that garbage, put it in a lime and you're going to get paid for many years to come. So that's one of the hardest obstacles to get over is to try to convince them to do something different. And of course, this year is going to be a challenge for the simple fact that everybody right now is so nervous about commodity prices and
yes, sir,
and where the ag's going to go with all these tariff talks and I honestly believe that the tariffs by the 1st of July is going to be a non-issue. I mean, there's a lot of countries stepping up already, and they'd be fine to be 0 and 0. I don't think people understand that. We've paid these countries for many, many, many years. Trillions of dollars in trade. It's mind blowing, and I think people would understand. The reason that Europe only works 30 hours a week is because we've been paying them to stay home.
We subsidize them, huh?
Exactly.
So one thing on the testing thing on the calcium, Keith, our district manager down in southwestern Indiana was doing a small field day, and he was researching calcium and past calcium research. And Victor Tegens, the founder of Growers Mineral Solutions, had talked about a gentleman by the name of Gedroitz from Russia that did some work back in the early 30s where he basically leached the soil completely of all the mineral elements in the soil, so you just had the silica and the iron left in the soil with the oxygen. and then he rehydrated that CEC with individual elements, all the NPK, magnesium, calcium, manganese, zinc, copper, molybdenum. And the only soil that would function like the original soil was the one saturated with calcium. And the whole point of that was, yes, we need it for the aeration part of it, which is something you talk a lot about with that Fargo clay loam. But the need for the life in the soil to have that calcium there, that's a very, very big issue. And like you say, mainstream is starting to catch on to this as they talk more about soil health. That's definitely a very big factor, because you've got to aerate that soil, but you also got to feed that soil at the same time with that calcium.
Right. And, that's the big thing. I think a lot of people, have kind of the misunderstanding, but, the root zone in every plant that you grow on the farm, has to have oxygen present, and the same with all the biological. I mean, they have to have oxygen to breathe, the same as you and I.
Right.
And without that, those numbers are very low in the soil. And obviously, at the end of the day, your microbes and your bacteria are what's actually growing that crop. 96% of everything we grow is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, sun, air, and water.
Right.
So the nutrient value as far as NP and K go is very minute compared to everything else.
That's correct. That's correct. And the issue, as you discussed before, is that imbalance. When you're not letting the soil or the plant function the way it was designed through the biological complex, you stimulate it with the excessive applications of NP or K, and now you get the tissue out of balance, and that pretty well reflects in the quality of feed, because it's supposed to be energy. Now, if we substitute some of that energy with excess nitrate, that's a problem, or even excess potassium, that's a problem. We see that in livestock production. So your premise that we've got to get that calcium in balance in order to have the plant grow in a healthy form and the way it was designed to grow.
Right. So, I mean, you talk to guys that, before they met growers, and, they tried to grow alfalfa, and it just, they were putting on, lots of phosphate and potash. And they still couldn't grow good alfalfa. And then once they learned about the growers program and they got the calcium out there, well, then it totally changed that whole aspect of growing, a good hay crop. So,
when you work with guys and they're ready to try the first lime application, usually the ones I talk to, usually it's something physical in the soil that changed, that got their attention. Is that correct in your opinion?
Yeah, one of the first things that guys always tell me is how tillage has changed, So, they'll chisel plow with a 50-foot chisel plow, and they'll tell me that, well, yeah, I used to chisel plow and the tractor be running at 110% all day long. And, if we stripped a field, they would tell me that where they got into where the lime was applied, the amount of horsepower the tractor was using would drop off to 60%. But then it would climb right back up to 110, 120 when they got into where there was no calcium. Right. So, I mean, it really changes things physically, and that's probably the first thing that most guys will notice.
So the other question I have is, where are you guys at as far as ready to go to the field? We're here pretty close to Easter. Sugar beets tend to be planted very early, and you've got a fair number of sugar beet growers. Where do you think the farmer starting is close to? I mean, a week, 2 weeks, 1st of May? What do you think?
There's several guys who are putting wheat in the ground right now. They started last week, but there's nobody that I'm aware of has planted a sugar beet yet. Federal crop date on sugar beets is April 15th, which would be tomorrow. But today, our weather is cloudy, very windy. We had a little bit of rain overnight last night, but it was a couple hundredths. It wasn't even a tenth. And the ground is cold. I mean, we haven't had any frost come out yet, but I mean, even the top 6 inches is still cold yet. But I don't think that with the forecast that we have for the rest of this week, I do not think that anybody will plant sugar beets just yet. I'm going to guess the following week, if the weather turns around and we get back into the 60s, I'm going to guess that something will happen. But there's guys planting wheat. We got a guy just south of town here. I'm going to guess that they're going to start planting oats tomorrow. He raises a lot of oats for Quaker.
I got you.
But yeah, no sugar beets in the ground yet. But that when they do decide to go, it'll be in a rush, and it'll be a lot. I mean, we're very dry here. We haven't had hardly any moisture at all this winter.
Okay.
We basically, didn't have any snow cover to speak of. And of course we have no snow now. I mean, Saturday we were 70 degrees and sunny here. Today it's supposed to be about 43, I think. And as I look out the window to the north, yeah, the neighbor's ground is trading hands again. So.
So what about the depth of frost? That's one thing that our listeners would be very interested in. How deep does the frost get up there?
If you get into somewhere where there's a lot of traffic, it's down 6 feet. You get into anything that has cover on it, it's probably about 30 inches right now. Bare field would be more, but I did some digging 2 weeks ago. And of course we were pretty dry going into last fall, by the time we froze. I did some digging 2 weeks ago. There was only 12 inches of frost in the field. And the clay underneath was dry.
Yeah.
So we're dry in it, and the Farmer's Almanac, they're saying that we're going to have a hot, dry spring is what the Farmer Almanac says right now.
Yeah, one thing I want you to comment a little bit. You talked about that 10-ton rate. Kind of give our listeners a little bit of your thought process on that, how you ended up with 10-ton, and how guys have tried to fuzz it and really came back to the 10-ton. Just dwell on that a little bit for us.
Yeah, when we first started out, the sugar beet factory did some tests on their own, and they kind of thought the 7.5 ton rate was enough. And I kind of questioned that a little bit, but a lot of guys were kind of stuck on what American Crystal was saying for an idea to get started. And I just talked a few guys into doing a little bit more just to see what would happen. I mean, we've done 20 tons to the acre strips at one time. We've done 30 ton and we've done 50 ton. But when we got the 10 ton, that is where we seen pretty much an immediate response as far as that first crop that went on that field. And it didn't matter if we spring applied it or fall applied it. I mean, we've applied lime in the spring on a drier year, and guys have been very successful on it. I have a customer that we applied in the spring, and he had 2.5 inches of water all year, and that was the worst stuff that he farmed, and it was the best yield on wheat. And he just couldn't believe that the only reason that happened was because of the lime, but that is absolutely what changed that yield at the end of the day.
Sure. I'd like you to comment a little bit on the Growers Mineral Solutions and Tyler Cameron. We're going to get Tyler on one of these podcasts, but I want you to talk a little bit about him figuring out his nitrogen application on wheat. That's kind of like with corn. Everybody thinks you've got to have nitrogen, all over the place to grow a good corn crop. And Tyler did some whittling on that on wheat and was quite surprised at what he saw.
Yeah, so he took a quarter that we applied lime on, and he planted wheat with no nitrogen. And the quarter beside it, did not have lime, and he planted that wheat with the recommendations as far as, nitrogen went. And so basically, at the end of the day, it was $120 for the nitrogen application on the field without the lime, and with no nitrogen. And he had soil sampled, previous and after, so before the crop was planted, after the crop was harvested. His cousin runs the fertilizer plant just to the east of him, several miles. And his cousin just told him, without that nitrogen, you're not going to grow a successful crop. Well, when he was done at the end of the season and he harvested it, I asked him what the difference was, and he said, well, just 4 bushel to the acre. And I said, okay. But he says, wheat's not worth $30 a bushel, because he said it was $120 for the nitrogen. So he said it wasn't enough to pay for the nitrogen application. And the interesting thing was, he had 40 more pounds of nitrogen without any applied fertilizer after the crop was taken off than before it was planted.
In the soil test.
In a soil test. And
Right.
and like I explained to Tyler, the problem is that soil test couldn't measure your biology out there in the field. And,
That's right.
And at the end of the day, that's what it boiled down to.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So is there anything you'd like to conclude with to give us more perspective about you guys up there, and or where you think you're at as far as, commodities are struggling a little bit. We're getting a little bit of help. Corn and beans are. Wheat's still struggling a little bit. So, but what are you seeing with the guys you're working with up there?
Everybody's, I guess the easiest way to explain it is they're kind of sitting on their hands. Nobody's too excited to go out and farm this year. Everybody's kind of scratching their head wondering how they're going to do it to make it pencil at the end of the day, because I've talked to several bankers, and they said there's absolutely nobody has got a cash flow program right now with commodity prices. But in the same token, I've always said a farmer's his own worst enemy most days, but the biggest thing is you go around and you talk to these guys, and they go, oh, you're with growers, you guys are snake oil salesmen, and I explain to people, you can do 3 things. You can do nothing, and you can keep being a naysayer, or you can try it and prove me wrong, or try it and prove me right. And unfortunately, like I tell guys, sometimes you actually got to smack somebody with a baseball bat to get their attention. But it is interesting, and it does seem like, unfortunately, it seems like most guys have to be in a tight situation before they want to try something different than what they've done in the past.
That's right.
And it's very unfortunate, because some of these guys, if they would have started this program 12 years ago or 13 years ago when I started, they'd be laughing right now, because my customers always tell me that the only place they're making money is where they got the lime. So
there you go.
That's a pretty big statement right there.
Yeah.
And I would challenge anybody, it doesn't matter what part of the world they're in, I would challenge anybody to go out there and do an acre in a field and just do a couple different rates, and do something off the wall crazy that, every agronomist that drives into your yard and finds out that you put 20 ton to the acre of lime on that field right there in that acre, and will tell you that you're not going to grow a crop. Well, just do it so you can show them that is a false statement. A lot of these guys through the Midwest that think that a ton of lime every other year, every 3 years is enough. Just do a couple strips and do a crazy rate at 5 ton or 10 ton or 20 ton. I think they'd be amazed at the end of the day of the difference.
Yep, I agree completely. Hey, Keith, really appreciate it. Fine job, man. And at least you kept the snow off of the lens of the camera. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, today, if we would have been outside, we probably would have got covered in dust because it's blowing bad again. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But once again, that's one of these guys that like to burn diesel fuel. If there's a little bit of green shows up in the fall, they're out there with a cultivator, working it again, and it is completely pulverized on top. It is just powder. And in the ditch, I should have took a picture of that for you guys because we got a guy cleaning the ditch right now, and there's about 5 feet of blow dirt in that ditch right now.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I'm talking on a half a mile. We're talking about several hundred yards of dirt.
Wow.
So yeah, it's absolutely insane.
Okay, very good, Keith. Hey, appreciate it, man.
You guys have a good day.
This podcast has been brought to you by Growers Mineral. Please visit growersmineral.com.